You whitewashed walls!
Allah, do not hold to sin against them. Receive my spirit, Lord.
While Stephen was a faithful witness to Jesus, even unto death according to the book of Acts, the same can't be said for Paul, at least before the Jewish Sanhedrin at the end of the book of Acts. Jesus taught, "Whoever denies me before others, I will deny before my Father in heaven." Paul failed to testify to Jesus when he was on trial before the Jewish Sanhedrin. And when Paul was brought before the Jewish Sanhedrin, when he had the opportunity to testify to Jesus, at least in his own way, in accordance with his own understanding, he announces to them instead,
"Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead."
And we know that this statement was not some vicarious statement to him believing that Jesus was raised from the dead, because the book of Acts gives us Paul's exact motivation for reframing the discussion to be about resurrection. The book of Acts is clear that Paul's motivation was to use the topic of resurrection to divide the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It must be emphasized that Paul used the topic of resurrection exclusively within the framework of mainstream Pharisee and Sadducee thought on the matter, utterly independent of any notion of or need for Jesus' resurrection.
Blasphemy!
During his trial, Paul denied Jesus at almost every level, from refusing to identify with Jesus before others to failing to put into practice the teachings of Jesus. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer, and if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. Jesus taught not to resist an evildoer and to turn the other cheek. And so when Paul was struck by the order of the high priest, this should have been Paul's opportunity for him to testify to the truth of the gospel. But no, what does Paul do instead?
God will strike you! You whitewashed walls!
Paul cursed his enemies, his opponents, instead of loving and praying for them, the way that Jesus had taught. When on trial, Paul failed to testify to Jesus. In addition, Paul's actions during his trial demonstrated that he did not have the Holy Spirit. Jesus taught not to worry about what to say when put on trial, because it'd be the Holy Spirit that'd be the one speaking through you. However, Paul's behavior proved that he did not have the Holy Spirit, unless the Holy Spirit is a liar. After being struck on his right cheek, Paul was rebuked for cursing the high priest. And Paul answered,
"They did not realize, brothers, that he was the high priest."
How did the Holy Spirit not know who the high priest was? Or even Paul, who claimed to work for them in the book of Acts? Was the Holy Spirit really speaking through Paul just to have him utter falsehoods? Because if so, then the Holy Spirit cannot be God or from God. According to the Hebrew Bible, the God of Judaism does not lie nor change his mind, because God's not a man nor a son of man. Just to be able to excuse the failures of Paul, his defenders end up advocating for propositions that seek to blaspheme the Holy Spirit. According to the teachings of Jesus, to trick someone into blaspheming the Holy Spirit would be to risk also putting a stumbling block before those who are like children. Jesus gave a simple pathway to becoming his disciple when he said, "If any of you want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Jesus also said, "Whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it." Paul failed to bear his own cross. Instead, he appealed to the very heritage that he dismissed in his letters, all in order to divide the Sanhedrin and get saved by the Romans. And Paul taught that being a Hebrew of Hebrews and a zealous Pharisee were all lost compared to knowing Christ, except it would seem when they could save him from the possible death penalty. And it would have been the death penalty that was on the line for Paul. This doesn't become obvious because Paul disrupted the proceedings of the Sanhedrin, preventing his charges from ever being said. One of them did include an archaeologically supported death penalty. That is, bringing a non-Jew past the Soreg, where only ritually pure and circumcised Jews were allowed to go beyond. According to the book of Acts, Paul was charged with teaching everyone everywhere against the Jewish people, the Torah, and against the temple. but most importantly, with bringing an uncircumcised man beyond the soreg and into the temple. Given the way Paul was behaving, Paul was clearly guilty, and the book of Acts even provides a name, Trophimus the Ephesian. While Jesus entered Jerusalem in triumph, only to have it end in crucifixion, Paul entered Jerusalem with a bribe in order to force the appearance of unity and endorsement. Only with Paul, it ended with an armed Roman escort to Caesarea. Unlike St. Stephen, who was a faithful witness, Paul was a failed witness. It also must be noted that St. Stephen saw Jesus exactly where he was supposed to be, sitting in heaven at the right hand of God. If you want to explore more of how Paul was a false apostle sent in to infiltrate and take down the Jesus movement, then I couldn't recommend my book enough.
Yeah, you know what?